The human's eyes narrowed, as if measuring Zira's words. And why would your people care about us? We've seen other species come and go. What makes us so special? Zira stood taller, her gaze unwavering. Because, despite your primitive nature, you have something that even the most advanced civilizations envy. The ability to overcome the odds. The Inkrath respects strength in all its forms, and yours is something we must understand. The human hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the captain's words. Your respect. You're here to study us. To use us as some experiment. Zira's eyes flicked to Ras, who was observing the exchange closely. The air between them crackled with tension, but Zira remained composed. We are not here to exploit your species, she said slowly, her tone now more serious. We only seek to understand the force that allowed you to survive your primitive ways. Your ability to fight against superior powers, your drive to evolve. These things are of great interest to us. We will not harm you unless forced to. The woman on the other end of the comm channel was silent for a long moment, her expression shifting as if weighing the captain's words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now, tinged with something like curiosity. Understood, Captain Nix. But we'll be watching you closely. Don't think for a moment that we'll let our guard down. As the transmission ended, Zira exhaled, her tense shoulders relaxing slightly. She turned to Ras, her mind already moving to the next stage of the mission. We must proceed with caution. If we push too hard, we may lose their trust, but we cannot be seen as weak either. Let's begin with an assessment of their military capabilities. I want a full scan of their planet's resources and defenses. Ras nodded, his voice steady. Understood. But do you think they'll be willing to cooperate, Captain? They seem rather hostile. Zira stared out into the endless void, her mind racing through the possibilities. She had no doubt that the humans were a force to be reckoned with. They may have been behind in technology, but they possessed something the Inkrath did not. The drive to push forward against any obstacle, no matter the cost. And that, Zira knew, would either be their greatest strength or their greatest downfall. We'll see, she replied, her voice firm with the confidence of someone who had weathered countless battles. We will give them the chance to show us their worth. But if they choose war, we will defend ourselves, and we will protect them if we must. The winds of justice slowly veered toward Earth, ready for whatever would come next. The winds of justice. Zira Nix stood resolutely on the command deck of the Winds of Justice, her violet-scaled hands resting lightly on the console. The ship's holographic displays flickered with incoming data streams from Earth. Despite her outward calm, there was a storm brewing inside her. The sheer complexity of the task before her weighed heavily. The humans had a history of defending themselves with unyielding spirit, but the Inkrath had no room for uncertainty. In Zira's mind, humans were a curious anomaly, full of potential, yes, but also a direct challenge to the Inkrath's dominant place in the galaxy. How did they manage to detect us? She muttered to herself, her eyes tracing the data from their failed encounter 3 months ago. The humans' primitive technology, as they called it, was far from perfect, yet they had managed to identify and engage with one of the Inkrath scout ships. The Inkrath had assumed that the humans were too distracted by their wars and poverty to notice anything beyond their own borders, but that assumption had been shattered. What was it about these creatures that allowed them to detect and destroy the ship, despite being so technologically inferior? A low hum from the communications panel brought Zira's attention back to the present. Ras, her first officer, had connected the ship's comms to Earth's global network, their most recent attempt at gaining communication with the humans. We've established a direct link with their government, Ras announced, his voice carrying a sense of curiosity. But they seem hesitant. They don't trust us, Captain. Zira nodded, her mind already working. She knew that humans, as primitive as they were, had something many species lacked: resilience. The Inkrath had conquered galaxies, wiping out entire civilizations, but this one small planet, Earth, was unlike any they had encountered before. Their ability to push back against such overwhelming forces was a testament to their survival instincts, and it was that spirit that Zira found both intriguing and dangerous. "I expect hesitation," Zira replied coolly, "but we have no choice but to move forward. Contact them again. If they truly think we're here for peace, they should have nothing to fear." Ras hesitated for a moment before nodding and following her orders. The communication link buzzed to life once more, this time connecting them to a human representative. A woman with short brown hair and a stern expression, her uniform adorned with the insignia of the Earth Federation's highest military division. "Captain Nix," the human woman said in a tone that was firm but cautious, "I must warn you. You are entering a planet already on high alert. We are aware of your presence, and we are not welcoming. The last encounter we had was an unfortunate misunderstanding, and we will not tolerate further aggression." Zira's eyes gleamed with interest. Despite the human's tough exterior, she could sense the underlying fear. It was a fear Zira had seen countless times before in weaker species. The difference with humans was that their fear was not rooted in helplessness. It was driven by the desire to protect themselves at all costs. "We come not for conflict," Zira replied, her voice carrying a rare warmth, the first sign of diplomacy she had allowed herself. "We are merely here to understand. Your species has piqued the interest of my people, and we believe that you may be capable of much more than you realize. But if it is conflict you want, you will find we are more than capable of defending ourselves." The humans resolve. As the winds of justice approached the outer orbit of Earth, the great expanse of space seemed to shrink, closing in around the ship with a quiet intensity. Captain Zira Nix stood on the command deck, her eyes focused on the blue-green planet ahead. There was something captivating about Earth. Its atmosphere shimmered with life, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile worlds of the Inkrath Empire. It was a world of contradictions, a place where survival depended not on sheer might, but on an unyielding will to fight, no matter the odds. "Captain," Ras called out, his voice laced with an unusual hesitation, "we're entering the Earth's gravitational pull. Their military systems are coming online. They're preparing for a possible engagement." Zira's sharp eyes flicked to the status board. Earth's defenses, though primitive by galactic standards, were formidable in their own right. The human fleet was made up of a mixture of outdated but reliable ships, hastily upgraded with advanced weaponry they had scavenged from past conflicts. It was a patchwork of ingenuity, a testament to human resourcefulness. "We anticipated this," Zira replied coolly. "Prepare for a peaceful approach. I want to extend an offer of communication before we take any further action." Ras nodded, but his expression remained wary. "They may not listen, Captain. Given their history, they might see this as another attack. We can't afford to underestimate them." Zira's mandibles clicked in thought. "I understand, First Officer, but we must extend the olive branch first. If they choose war, then we'll defend ourselves. If not, perhaps this will be the beginning of something new." As the ship cruised closer to the planet, a soft beep interrupted the moment. A communication signal had been received. Zira gestured toward Ras, signaling him to open the line. A sharp crackle filled the air before a human voice broke through the static. It was the same woman from earlier, the one who had spoken on behalf of Earth's Federation. Her face appeared on the screen, her expression taut, but there was no sign of panic, only the quiet determination Zira had come to expect. "Captain Nix," the human said, her voice calm but firm. "This is Commander Elena Briggs of the Earth Federation. We've received your message, and we are ready to hear you out. But make no mistake, we will not tolerate any further threats to our planet or people. Speak quickly." Zira regarded the woman with a cool gaze, impressed by her composed demeanor. Humans were unpredictable, but in their ability to face danger head-on, they were unparalleled. "I appreciate your willingness to communicate," Zira said, choosing her words carefully. "We are not here to harm you. My people seek only to understand. Earth's survival, its resilience, has caught the attention of the Enkrath Empire. We are not here to conquer. We are here to learn, and perhaps to protect. But if you see us as a threat, we will defend ourselves. Commander Briggs' eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something else, something between skepticism and curiosity. Protect us. You want to protect humanity. Why should we trust you? Your people have a history of invasion, not alliance. Zira's eyes softened just slightly. I understand your wariness. Your history is filled with conflict and distrust. But I offer you this. My people have been watching you for centuries. Despite all your flaws, your world continues to survive. You push forward, you adapt, and you fight back. The Enkrath have conquered countless civilizations, but you are unlike any species we have encountered. Your strength is in your unity, your refusal to bend under pressure. That is why we are here. The human woman's expression remained unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of interest. You really believe we're special, don't you? She asked softly, almost to herself. Zira nodded, her voice unwavering. Yes, we believe that the strength of your spirit can no longer be ignored. And in the coming days, you may find that we are not so different after all. There was a brief silence as Commander Briggs seemed to consider the captain's words. Then she spoke again, her voice tinged with caution. What do you want from us, Captain Nix? Cooperation, Zira answered simply. We do not seek dominance. We seek understanding. If we share our knowledge, perhaps together, we can strengthen your defenses, help you face the threats that you cannot yet see. And in return, we wish to learn from your determination. Your species' ability to overcome impossible odds is something the Enkrath admire. Briggs leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on Zira's face. What if we reject your offer? What if we fight back? Zira's eyes were hard now, her voice carrying the weight of her convictions. If you choose to fight, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves. The Enkrath do not lose battles, and we will not lose this one. The tension in the air was thick, but Zira held her ground. She understood the stakes. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission. It was an opportunity to show the Enkrath what humans were capable of. And if Earth's leaders rejected that offer of cooperation, it would prove that humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. But Zira's confidence was not without doubt. Humans were unpredictable after all. Their resilience was both their greatest strength and their greatest vulnerability. They were capable of extraordinary things, but only if they could overcome their own fear. Think on it, Commander, Zira said, her voice softer now, almost coaxing. You do not have to accept us now. But understand this, the galaxy is changing. You cannot remain isolated forever. Commander Briggs hesitated for a moment, her gaze fixed on Zira, as though trying to read the captain's true intentions. We'll consider your offer, she said finally, her voice firm once more. But understand this, we will never surrender our freedom, and we will fight to the death to protect our planet. Zira nodded. As you should. I will await your decision. With that, the communication was severed, and the room fell into a heavy silence. Ras turned to Zira, his expression unreadable. Do you think they will cooperate, Captain? Zira's gaze never wavered from the view of Earth, now looming large before them. I don't know. But I believe that, for all their fear and suspicion, they will see the value of cooperation. And when they do, they will be stronger for it. The winds of justice continued its steady course toward Earth. The next phase of their mission was about to begin. And for better or for worse, the future of both the Enkrath and humanity now rested on the fragile balance between fear and trust. Zira knew one thing for certain. The humans would either rise to the challenge, or they would face the consequences. And the Enkrath were watching closely, ready to act when the time came. The first strike. The winds of justice drifted into the lower atmosphere of Earth's orbit, its engines humming low and steady as Captain Zira Nix paced the command deck. The tension was palpable, both in the ship's hull and in her mind. Ras, standing near the communications panel, glanced at her frequently but didn't speak, knowing better than to disturb her focus at this moment. Every decision now weighed heavily on Zira's shoulders. She knew Commander Elena Briggs' response had been neither fully dismissive nor entirely welcoming. The humans were unpredictable. Too many variables, too many hidden motives. They had survived countless invasions, internal wars, and environmental catastrophes. To think that a species like that would simply trust the Encraft because of a few pleasant words was naive, even by their standards. But Zira had always prided herself on being a tactician, and tactics required patience, subtlety, and reading between the lines. "Captain," Ras called out, his voice tinged with caution. "We're getting a message from Earth's command center. They've taken a defensive posture and are launching their own ships. They don't seem to be willing to engage diplomatically." Zira's mandibles tightened. She had expected resistance, but this was more than just an act of caution. It was a declaration. Earth was making its first move, and it was not one of negotiation. "Open the channel," she ordered, her tone firm. The screen flickered, and a new human face appeared. This time, the commander's face was harder, more determined. "Captain Nix, you've overstayed your welcome in our orbit. You've given us your offer, and we've heard your words. But as you can see, we're not in the habit of waiting for someone else to make the first strike. We are fully prepared to defend Earth." Zira studied the woman's face, noting the tight set of her jaw and the firmness in her eyes. There was no room for compromise in her expression. The humans were not afraid. They were ready. That much was clear. "Commander Briggs," Zira responded, her voice calm but resolute. "You misunderstand. We are not here to conquer. But if you force our hand, we will defend ourselves. We do not wish for war, but we will fight if necessary." Briggs' eyes flashed with something like contempt. "You've already shown us your hand, Captain. Your presence here is a threat, whether you admit it or not. We cannot afford to let our guard down." Zira's mind raced. Earth's response was predictable, but still disappointing. The Encraft had hoped for a peaceful resolution, yet humanity's instinct for self-preservation had led them to immediate defense. What Zira had underestimated was the depth of their pride and their fear. It wasn't that the humans couldn't understand her offer. It was that they couldn't see beyond their immediate survival instinct. The humans had been hardened by centuries of conflict. Their entire history had been built on fighting, resisting, and surviving. They had never truly known peace, only fragile truces and broken alliances. Perhaps, Zira realized, that was the problem. They did not know what peace could look like. "We can avoid this," Zira said softly, though her words were meant more for herself than the human commander. "There is another way." But there was no time to contemplate further. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the winds of justice, cutting Zira's thoughts short. The human fleet had moved into position, their ships coming out of stealth mode, their weapons primed and ready. The first strike was imminent. "Captain," Ras shouted, "the humans are launching missiles. Their fleet is engaging." Zira's eyes narrowed as she watched the display on the console. 3 of Earth's ships were closing in, their weapons targeting the winds of justice directly. She could feel the energy shift in the air, thick with tension. This was no longer a negotiation. This was a battle for survival. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she commanded coldly. "Activate shields and power up the weapon systems, but do not fire unless we are fired upon." The bridge hummed with activity as crew members scrambled to follow her orders. The massive warship's shields shimmered into place, their energy fields pulsating with a steady hum. Zira felt a deep resolve settle over her. This wasn't the way she wanted it, but she had always known that to unite the galaxy, there would need to be sacrifices. The first missile exploded against the winds of Justice's shields, sending a ripple through the vessel. The impact was intense, but the shields held, reflecting the energy harmlessly into space. Zira's hand tightened on the railing. The humans were testing them, probing for weaknesses. She couldn't let them think for even a second that the Encraft were vulnerable. All systems report intact, Ras called out, his voice calm but urgent. We've taken minimal damage. Returning fire now. Zira hesitated for only a moment. Her instincts screamed at her to strike back, to show the humans that their primitive missiles would not stop them. But something inside her urged caution. This wasn't a war she wanted. She needed them to understand that. No, she said firmly, the word heavy with resolve. We will not fire unless necessary. I will not give them the justification they seek. Another barrage of missiles flew toward the ship, this time aimed directly at the command deck. The winds of justice lurched as the shields absorbed the blast. But Zira was not deterred. She wasn't here to destroy. She was here to bring them to reason. Deploy the EMP, Zira ordered, her voice unyielding. Disrupt their communication systems. Ras quickly activated the ship's electromagnetic pulse, sending a shockwave that rippled through the human fleet. The energy of their weapons faltered, and several of their ships lost communication with one another. The offensive stalled as their commanders scrambled to regain control. It was a momentary advantage, but it was enough. Zira wasted no time. Commander Briggs, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. You've attacked, and now you see the consequences. I did not want this, but I will not be provoked. Surrender your weapons and cease fire. This is your last chance. For a brief moment, the comms were silent. Then Briggs' face reappeared, her expression now a mask of frustration and defiance. You think we're afraid of you. This is our home. We will fight to the last breath if we have to. And we'll die with pride knowing we stood against invaders like you. Zira's eyes flashed with understanding, and for the first time since arriving, a deep sadness settled over her. The humans' fight wasn't just about defense, it was about fear, pride, and survival. Their history had taught them that the only way to preserve their freedom was through constant resistance. But resistance to what? To everything. Or perhaps to their own need to grow, to trust. Very well, Zira said, her voice low and resolute. Then you will face what is inevitable. She turned to Ras. Target their lead ship's weapon systems and prepare to disable, not destroy. The first salvo was sent from the Encraft ship, a series of powerful beams that hit the human fleet's lead vessel, disabling its weapon systems and sending shockwaves through their fleet. The battle was far from over, but Zira had made her choice. She would bring them to the negotiating table, by force if necessary. For now, the humans had proven their resilience, but Zira had one thing they did not: the knowledge that survival didn't always mean victory. Sometimes it meant compromise. And it was time for Earth to learn that lesson. The unexpected call for mercy. The battle had not ended, but the course of the conflict had shifted. The winds of justice hung in orbit, its massive form a testament to the might and technological superiority of the Encraft. Yet, despite their powerful position, Zira Nix felt a lingering discomfort. The energy pulses from the battle had settled, but her heart beat faster with every passing minute. She had known battles before, but this felt different. Her mind raced, mulling over Commander Briggs' words and the implications of humanity's resolve. Earth wasn't just defending itself, it was battling for its very identity. The scars of countless wars and invasions had left humanity distrustful of anything they didn't fully control. Zira understood this, perhaps better than she wanted to. She had seen similar reactions in other species, cultures fighting tooth and nail for their autonomy, even when there was no real threat. It was a common trait among the sentient species of the galaxy. Fear of the unknown was often more dangerous than the invaders themselves. Captain, Ras's voice cut through her thoughts, drawing her attention back to the matter at hand. We're receiving another communication. It's from Earth's defense fleet. They want to speak directly with you. Zira's mandibles pressed tightly together. Her first instinct was to dismiss the request, but she knew that now, more than ever, patience was the key. There was something in the tone of the message that felt different, perhaps a sign of weakness or hesitation from the humans. This was a pivotal moment, and Zira had to be cautious. "Put it through," she ordered, taking a deep breath. The screen flickered once more, and Commander Elena Briggs appeared. This time, her expression was not one of defiance, but of something softer. Her face was still resolute, but there was an unmistakable fatigue behind her eyes, as if the weight of the situation was starting to wear on her. "Captain Nix," Briggs said, her voice heavy with an emotion Zira couldn't quite place. "You've shown us your strength. We've seen your power, and we've underestimated you." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "But we cannot fight a war with no end. We cannot lose everything we've built just to prove a point. You've made your position clear. We've made ours. But we can still find a way out of this." Zira's heart beat a little faster as she studied the human commander. It was a shift in tone, one that Zira had not expected. It was one thing to be defiant in the face of an invader, but to offer a path to peace meant something deeper, something more human. It was their pride, yes, but also their capacity for hope. Zira had not thought Earth capable of understanding peace, not after all they had been through. "I never wanted war, Commander Briggs," Zira said, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of a deeper truth. "Your people are resilient, yes, but you're also fragile in ways you don't fully understand yet. Your fight isn't just with me. It's with yourselves. I know what it's like to fight when you feel cornered. But I also know what it's like to regret it." Briggs looked away, her expression darkening as if a hidden pain had been brought to the surface. "I've seen the horrors of war, Captain. I've lost people, too many people. It's a fight we didn't ask for, but it's one we've had to fight every day of our lives. I've seen the destruction, the despair, and I don't want to see it again. I just don't know how to make it stop." Zira's gaze softened. "It's not just about stopping the war, Commander. It's about choosing not to start it in the first place." For a long moment, there was silence. The screens flickered again, a faint hum vibrating through the ship as Earth's fleet regrouped. Zira could feel the pressure building, the tension hanging in the air like the calm before a storm. This was the moment when everything could either change or fall apart. The humans had taken a defensive posture for so long, convinced they could face anything. But now they were questioning themselves. Zira knew that the path to peace wasn't always about fighting back harder. It was about showing the enemy what they were truly fighting for. "Then, what do you propose?" Briggs asked quietly, the exhaustion in her voice unmistakable. Zira paused before responding, weighing the importance of her words carefully. "We propose an armistice. I will remove the weapons pointed at your planet, and we will stand down. In exchange, I ask that Earth reconsiders its approach to the Inkrath, to diplomacy, and to the larger galactic community. We don't have to fight, Commander. We can rebuild this together." The human commander's brow furrowed, and she looked down at something off-screen, perhaps deliberating. It was a risk, offering peace at such a volatile moment. But Zira knew it was the only way forward. If they kept fighting, both sides would lose. Zira had seen what war had done to her own people. It was the Inkrath who had once fought fiercely against other races, only to find that their own power had become a burden rather than a blessing. "I'll have to speak with my leaders," Briggs said after a long pause. "But you've given us a choice, and for the first time, in a long time, I think, maybe it's the right one." Zira nodded. "I will wait for your response. But know this, Commander, if you truly want peace, it requires both sides to be willing to put down their weapons. Not just in the moment, but forever." Briggs held Zira's gaze for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll speak to my government, and I'll get back to you. Just give us time, please." The screen went black, leaving Zira standing in the center of the command deck, a mix of hope and uncertainty swirling inside her. She had done everything in her power to push for peace, but it was now out of her hands. The humans would either choose a future of cooperation or one of continued conflict. Zira knew that even if they did choose peace, it would not be an easy road. The wounds of war, both literal and psychological, ran deep, and they would not heal quickly. Ras, standing at the side, hesitated before speaking. "Captain, you think she'll accept?" Zira took a long breath, her antennae twitching slightly. "I don't know, Ras, but this is the best chance we've got. The humans are stubborn, but they're not blind. They're afraid of losing, but they also fear losing themselves. The question is, which fear will guide them?" The crew fell into a tense silence as they awaited the humans' next move. The ships surrounding the winds of justice were still poised to strike, but for the first time, Zira believed there was a chance for something else. The path forward. The weeks following Commander Briggs' transmission felt like an eternity. Zira Nix spent the long days aboard the winds of justice, pacing the vast command deck and weighing the impossible choices before her. The fleet remained in orbit, its engines silent but ready. Across the galaxy, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The Encraft had dealt blow after blow to the human forces, but they had never truly crossed the threshold into annihilation. Zira had deliberately pulled back, halting further assaults to give Earth's leadership the time they had requested. But time was a double-edged sword. As she stared at the digital map of Earth, swirling like a marble in space, she knew that the longer the humans delayed, the more their position would become untenable. The Encraft had given them a chance to negotiate peace, and yet it felt like an invitation they were hesitant to accept. Zira couldn't decide if they were biding time to strategize, or if they were simply too proud to admit defeat. Either way, the reality was clear. The decision now lay in the hands of the human government. And if they chose wrong, it would be her fleet, her people, who would be forced to fight again. A soft chiming sound broke her thoughts. The communication console blinked, a signal from Earth. Zira's breath caught in her chest as she turned to face the screen, her heart thumping in her ears. This was it. Captain Nix. Briggs' familiar face appeared on the screen, but there was something different in her demeanor this time. She was seated, her uniform slightly disheveled, as though the weight of the moment had pressed down on her. Zira instinctively braced herself for whatever news would follow. "Commander," Zira replied, her voice firm but containing a trace of tension. "What is your decision?" Briggs let out a slow sigh, her eyes briefly closing as she collected her thoughts. The moment stretched, and for a fleeting instant, Zira wondered if the human leader might back out. But when Briggs opened her eyes again, there was a hardness to them that hadn't been there before. A resolve. "We've made our decision," Briggs said, her voice steady, but not without its own exhaustion. "We don't want to fight anymore. Not when we see the consequences so clearly, but we cannot surrender either. We want peace, Captain Nix. True peace, not a temporary armistice, but a future where our people can coexist without fear of annihilation." Zira's antennae flicked upward in surprise. This was a turn she hadn't expected. Peace wasn't simply about ending the fighting. It was about finding a way forward that preserved both their peoples. "What do you propose?" Briggs' gaze grew more intense. "We want to negotiate a treaty, one that acknowledges the sovereignty of both the Encraft and humanity. We want security for both of our people, a mutual understanding of boundaries and respect for our cultures. But we cannot do it on our own. We need the cooperation of your leadership, Zira. We need a voice like yours, one that can speak for us, for both sides, to ensure that peace doesn't remain just a dream." Zira's mind raced as she processed the gravity of the request. A treaty, yes, but with conditions. Not only did the humans want peace, but they wanted a partnership, an alliance, something deeper than mere survival. They sought a future that integrated their culture with the Encraft, an unthinkable proposal for many in her ranks. The Encraft had always viewed other species as either allies or threats. To propose something as delicate as a diplomatic union required trust on both sides. "We would need to be careful, Commander," Zira replied slowly. I would have to bring this before my council. You know that peace is a fragile thing, but I understand the importance of what you are asking. If we are to move forward, we will need to dismantle centuries of suspicion between our species. The Nkrath will not agree to something without absolute guarantees. Briggs nodded, her expression tightening with the same uncertainty that Zira herself felt. We're prepared to meet those guarantees, Captain. We'll pull back our remaining fleets and cease all hostile activities. We will make it clear to the people of Earth that the path to peace has been offered. But you have to know, this is the last chance we get. If this fails, if your council rejects this offer, there's no coming back from it. Zira's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she saw a reflection of her own people's plight in the eyes of this human commander. They had both suffered too long under the shadow of war. Both sides had bled, both sides had lost, and yet neither was truly willing to accept the cost of their pride. The stakes now were higher than they had ever been. I will return to the council, Zira said, her voice solemn. We will deliberate, and when we have our answer, I will contact you again. Briggs seemed to release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, Captain, for giving us this chance. The transmission cut out, and Zira stood silently for a moment, her mind spinning. The winds of justice was still poised above Earth, the waiting game now shifting from the military to the diplomatic. She knew the stakes could not have been clearer for both sides. Failure meant a future of endless conflict. Success, however, meant an unprecedented alliance, a blending of two worlds in a way the galaxy had never seen before. As Zira left the command deck, she made her way to the council chamber, her thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty and hope. Her people had come a long way, fighting in the name of their empire, believing that conquest was the only path to greatness. But here, now, she felt the weight of a different kind of greatness, one forged not by power, but by understanding. She entered the vast, dimly lit council chamber where the leaders of the Nkrath awaited her. The room was silent, save for the soft clicking of claws on stone as the elders turned their attention to her. They had seen many battles and many victories. But this was something entirely different. Captain Nix, Elder Vress called, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. You returned from your meeting with Earth. What have you decided? Zira stood before the council, her mind focused on the gravity of the moment. The words she spoke next would change the future of both worlds forever. The humans have made their decision, she said quietly. They want peace, but not just peace. They want a treaty, an alliance. They seek mutual recognition and understanding between our species. The elders stirred. Murmurs of surprise filled the room. Some seemed hopeful, others skeptical. And what is your decision, Captain? Vress asked, his eyes narrowing in thought. Do you believe their offer? Zira held the gaze of each elder before answering, her voice steady and unwavering. I believe they have suffered enough. And so have we. But we must not rush this. We must ensure that any alliance forged is one built on trust and equality, not coercion. The council chamber fell silent, the weight of Zira's words settling over them like a blanket of snow. The decision was now in their hands, and though the future was uncertain, Zira knew this. The path forward had already begun. Whether the Nkrath would rise to the challenge or retreat into their old ways depended on the courage of the leaders before her. It was time to decide. The future of the galaxy was on the line. And so, the council deliberated, the fate of two species hanging in the balance, waiting for the moment when they would either transcend their differences or fall back into the shadows of war. Zira stood at the center of it all, knowing that peace would never come without a price, but the price of war had already been paid.